They chose to make a sequel to a movie that had mixed reviews. They chose to bring back the villain that they killed in the first movie. They chose to bring back the hero, but not completely. But they didn't bring back the original writer and director because he was too busy being Wes Craven. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss the return of Swamp Thing. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair is the host of the Interview with a Horror Virgin podcast. Please welcome James Brooks. How are you, James?
I'm doing well tonight, Laramie. I really enjoyed this film that you selected me for.
Oh, yeah. We're in the middle of March Madness, where we are taking a look at a deep dive into Swamp Thing. We've already released out the episode of the original Swamp Thing movie, where Tim from the 80s Flick Flashback joined me for that one. And now I've got James here, and I had to pull James. I mean, this is one of those that you get a horror vibe out of Swamp Thing. I don't know how much so with this movie, but the comics, you at least could say, we got a little horror vibe to them.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I loved the practical effects and everything of it. It had some creepy horror moments to it.
Yeah, although they would usually get messed up by some goofy bit, but we'll get into that later. Let's get into a little bit of the background behind this movie. Did you know it only took them 27 days to film this movie?
I can see it. I honestly can, with the pacing, the editing, just the locations too.
Oh, it was edited in a hotel room.
That's awesome.
And locations, you and I are both familiar with the locations. This movie was filmed in good old Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, okay, that I didn't know. It looked very backwoodsy. I was about to say maybe somewhere along the East Coast, or maybe Louisiana if we really wanted to get, real boggy or swampy.
I mean, it's supposed to be set in Louisiana. But no, the first movie they filmed in South Carolina, but this one they came down to good old Georgia. You and I are both familiar with that area.
Yeah.
And so here's some fun little tidbits. So they had to turn the lights off periodically throughout filming so they could remove all the dead bugs that had accumulated on the lights.
I can just imagine them just sitting on set, and the next thing you know, you get like all these gnats, flies, just all building up, and then next thing you know, hold, dust them all out. That's hilarious.
Another piece of information that I actually learned while watching the movie with the director commentary on is that the set for Arcane's lab was built in a warehouse in Savannah. They said it was the hottest place they had ever experienced in their life.
Oh man, what part of Savannah? Like specifically, did he say where, or was it just warehouse?
He said it was just right outside of Savannah. I can't remember what he said. He did kind of explain like what the warehouse was used for. I think it was just like a storage building. So there was no. My guess would then be there was no circulation. There was no any kind of air conditioning units or ventilation. Probably it was probably just some big storage warehouse. That's intended for people to just go into, get something, and get out of. And yet they're filming probably for hours at a time under the hot lights of the filming. They said that temperatures were always in the hundreds.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That actually explains a lot now. At one point in the film when I noticed like one of the actors had like a very shiny forehead. And I was like, dude, you just walked in here. Like, are you all right?
Could you imagine, though, being Dirk Durock in that Swamp Thing costume?
Right. I was feeling like, oh, wow, this is going to be a, Captain America moment where poor Steve Rogers and everyone's going to start fainting on set.
So the original Swamp Thing came out. It was actually the pretty much the follow-up superhero movie to Superman the movie, the Christopher Reeves epic. The granddaddy of them all, as I have called it before. So it kind of rode on the coattails of Superman the movie. This movie was actually released the same year as Batman the movie, but actually came out before it. This movie came out May 12th of 1989, which is a full 5 weeks before Tim Burton's Batman came out.
That's interesting. So like, I can only imagine the kind of marketing they had, knowing that Batman's coming out, but poor Return of Swamp Thing didn't really, I guess, set well with audience members, because to me, I would have drifted towards the Batman just after seeing, like, some of the stuff with the Return of Swamp Thing.
Yeah, I kind of, as much as of a Superman fan as I am, I kind of feel like this movie falls more under the line of like Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which came out in 87.
Guilty pleasure film.
Yeah, but it kind of has that feel of, it's more, and we'll get into this more a little bit later, but the tonal aspect of it, that it's more cartoonish. I felt
like I was watching a Toxic Avenger movie.
Oh, yes. I actually jotted that down. I didn't officially put it in my notes, but I jotted it down. I was like, this reminds me of Toxic Avenger. And Blake and I actually discussed the cartoon, and you look like you've never heard of the cartoon.
I haven't. I didn't know there was a cartoon.
Yeah, listen to that episode. Take a look on YouTube. There's only 5 episodes. It got canceled after 5 episodes. There's only 5 episodes.
That's a shame.
But it came out the exact same year as Toxic Crusaders, the cartoon that was based off of Toxic Avengers. And so it has that same animation style. You and I actually discussed this right before we started recording, but I was very curious, with you being the horror enthusiast that you are. This movie, the original, of course, was written and directed by Wes Craven. Wes Craven, of course, became huge following Nightmare on Elm Street after he did the first Swamp Thing. Again, you can hear more about that in our episode about Swamp Thing, the first movie. But this movie was directed by Jim Wynorski. Go ahead. I'll let you go ahead, since you said you already knew. Go ahead and tell everyone how they should know Jim Wynorski.
Well, Jim Wynorski, for me, I watched his film called Chopping Mall.
Chopping Mall.
So I love Chopping Mall so much.
I don't know about love, but I have seen Chopping Mall, and that's a movie. That is a movie.
Listen to Joe Bob with Chopping Mall, guys. It's actually really, really funny if you want to hear someone who's actually like watched that film beginning to end, just like commentating it.
Now, are you also aware that he's the director of Sorority House Massacre 2?
That I didn't know.
Yeah, well, he actually used a pseudonym. He uses the name Arch Stanton.
Interesting.
Yeah. He has another comic book connection. He actually directed the, I would say, cult classic. Very hard to find, I will say this. The movie Vampirella.
That name actually sounds very familiar. It sounds very familiar. I don't know where, though.
It's based on a comic book, and then he made the movie.
Oh, no, never mind. I'm thinking of Barbarella.
Oh, no. which Bethany and I just did an episode about back in Valentine's Day. So
never mind then.
You can go to that one. Ooh, you now brought that up. There's a lot of things I could connect in this movie to Barbarella.
Oh gosh,
but we're not going to do that. Speaking of, are you aware of Jim Wynorski's? Again, we keep this show as PG as we can. Quote unquote adult movies.
Nope. Chopping Malls, as far as I know. I did not know he even did more.
Yep. Nope. He did some adult horror spoofs.
Oh no.
Including a parody of Cloverfield called Cleavage Field.
What?
He did The Bear Wench Project.
Oh my god.
Following on the heels of the same director he followed here, Wes Craven, he did a horror spoof called The Hills Have Thighs.
I don't think you want to do an adult film of The Hills Have Eyes after how many we've seen so far. It gets pretty bad with those films.
He did.
Oh, I can't get over the Blair Witch.
I got to keep going. I love these names. He did Para-Knockers Activity. Paranormal Activity, Para-Knockers Activity. Yeah, that makes sense.
It does.
And he did The Witches of Brestwick.
No, he didn't. No, he did not do that with
The Witches of Brestwick.
No.
1 and 2. He directed both it and its sequel.
The name. What would you do? Oh my god.
And
oh, that's hilarious. Though.
And just to go ahead and throw this out, that is actually in that part of his directorial resume, that is actually where he met Monique Gabriel, who plays Poinsettia in this movie.
Poinsettia. What a name.
I just want to point that out.
I can see it
woman,
now.
the head female guard.
Mm-hmm. Very dolled up for a guard, I must say.
That is where they met. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the characters. We're not going to focus an awful lot on the two returning characters because we talked about them in the first Swamp Thing episode, but I'll hit on them really quick for anyone who's listening to this one first. But Swamp Thing is played by Dick Durock. Dick Durock played Swamp Thing in the first movie. Of course, Alec Holland was played by Ray Wise, but Swamp Thing was played by Dick Durock. Dick Durock actually thought that he was completely Swamp Thing, but anyone who has seen this movie can clearly tell that ain't his voice.
Okay. Now that you mention it, I did notice some audio stuff with him when he was talking to someone. I'm like, no, something doesn't sound right. What did like bad mics or something? Or
no, nope. In fact, when the movie was released, both Durock and the director were surprised that his voice was not used in the film. That apparently someone with the studio just went, nah, we're gonna dub his voice and use some other actor who apparently is going to, try to sell me something on an infomercial. That's what I thought listening to his voice.
Okay. That's so strange. And was he like approached by this, or did they just do it in post-production?
They just did it.
Again, interesting.
Durock and Wynorski did not find out until they viewed the final film.
Did he do anything? Like, did he sue?
I guess I couldn't find anything. I assumed his contract was in a way that protected them, that they could do that. So yeah, nope. Dick Durock we still don't hear his voice. I do think that the Swamp Thing television series, which started right after this movie, in which Dick Durock played the character again, even in the same suit he wore in this movie. I mean, the same suit he wore in this movie for the television show. I do think it's actually his voice in the television show, though.
Oh, okay. And they kept the suit and everything? Because I was noticing when I was looking at like some of the production shots for the first film, what got the budget to go up more to give him a lot more Swamp Thing look, to make him look like Swamp Thing and not just some like guy in a morph suit.
Yeah, that suit is so much better. And it makes Durock actually look bigger.
It does. He looks taller. He looks buff.
Yeah, he looks like a superhero, a comic book character.
Mm-hmm.
Versus a ripoff of Gilman that he looked like in the first movie.
He really did. It's just nothing.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I'll go ahead and mention, Swamp Thing first appeared in The House of Secrets number 92 in July of 1971. Although, as I discussed in the Swamp Thing episode, that was not Alec Holland. That was Alex Olsen. And the Alec Holland version of Swamp Thing didn't appear until Swamp Thing number 1 in October of 1972. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there for anyone who has not listened to the previous episode.
Oh, so I know you probably touched on this even more. Was it like just a character thing that they did, or was it just they wanted to go like a new origin story for Swamp Thing?
It's not that different of an origin story. They just I don't quite know why the name change. DC Continuity eventually came around and explained it all. But yeah, it's just they went with Alec Holland and they gave him a similar but slightly different origin. It also brought it into more modern time because the Alex Olsen House of Secrets story takes place at like the turn of the century.
Oh, okay.
Made it a little bit more of like, because House of Secrets was like these one-shot kind of horror stories.
Yeah.
And it's kind of reminiscent of like Creepshow. And he, of course, was not the only character and actor to come back for the sequel. Anton Arcane, although I don't think they ever call him Anton in either movie. I think they just call him Arcane.
Yeah, I just heard Arcane every time. Arcane Mansion, Arcane.
Played by Louis Jourdan, who, again, we talked about a little bit more in the previous Swamp Thing episode. The character of Arcane first appeared in Swamp Thing number 2 in January of 1973. And I got to say, even though I'd seen this movie before, you got to think in 1989 when this movie came out and you see Arcane's the villain, anyone who saw the original 82 movie just goes, wait, what? Didn't he die at the end of the movie?
Not knowing the full story of Swamp Thing, just kind of remembering it as a kid, I didn't know that much about the villain. It was just guy, green suit, doing something. And then when I went and watched The Return of Swamp Thing, I wanted to look up the villain or just like the actual villain itself. And then when you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that the villain is returning, what happened to him in the first film?
So in the first film, he's this mad scientist trying to come up with this way of becoming immortal. And in the first film, he drinks his own formula, which then transforms him into this like werewolf, warthog looking monster who then grabs a sword and fights Swamp Thing out in the swamp. And then Swamp Thing kills him. So not only is he killed, he's this werewolf warthog creature.
Oh, like one of the hybrids that he made?
Yeah, kinda.
Interesting, because that is some weird continuity right there now that I think about it.
Well, they have a throwaway line in this movie to kind of explain it about how they were able to bring him back. And I think you're also supposed to assume that he used his wife, Heather Locklear's mom, in order to help do that. Again, I'm saying assume here because they don't explain any of it. But I think that's how you're also supposed to assume that he's responsible for her death. So I didn't really understand it. Like I said, it's a throwaway line that's said by Dr. Rochelle. So that's it. I will say, though, that Jourdain's, his dry delivery works so well against the campiness of this movie.
Yeah, it almost feels like he's the only serious one, like actually trying with their character in the movie. It actually helped it with some of like the campier moments between other characters and their dialogue.
All right, let's get into new characters. The only big new character that really got joined here was Abby Arcane, played by Heather Locklear in one of her earlier movie roles. This movie actually contained 2 inside jokes about Locklear. Did you catch either one of them?
I did not. And I watched it at least 3 times, and I still didn't catch it.
All right. So the first one's in her very first scene at the flower shop when she tells her assistant, leave the TV on. They love that TJ what's his name. And she's referencing the television show TJ Hooker, the William Shatner cop drama. You remember from... You're familiar with TJ Hooker?
My dad told me about it because he watched Star Trek and told me all about William Shatner and his stuff afterwards. But whatever the plot is to it, that I don't know. Yeah,
well, all you need to know is that Heather Locklear was on the show. She was one of the supporting characters. Later in the movie, Gunn and Poinsettia are comparing scars.
I love that scene.
And Poinsettia says she got one of her scars from a Motley Crue concert. Now, do you know the reference here?
No, I don't, but I'm kind of curious to see what you're about to say.
At the time, Heather Locklear was married to drummer of Motley Crue, Tommy Lee.
Okay. Wait. So they threw like these little references in here just for fun, I guess?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's another one that I'll mention later for one of the other actors, but yeah.
That's so funny.
Inside jokes there. I do want to point this out because I saw this in almost everything. It was like this just has to be said in any review or any type of research you look up. Heather Locklear actually won the Razzie Award for Worst Actress for this film.
Did she accept it?
I don't think she did. But here's my thing, though, with that. Is that fair? Because I think she knew what movie she was making.
I honestly think she was, too. She kind of came in, and I think just like even with her characters of her acting stuff, she knew that this was just going to be hamming it up. And she really did a good job of it. Yeah,
because whereas in the first movie, you can tell like Adrienne Barbeau, she was trying to make a serious movie.
But, she was?
Well, yeah. I mean, She was trying to make a serious movie. In the Wes Craven, they were all trying to make a serious movie in the Wes Craven, the original.
Now that you mention it, I do remember it had like it had some drama to it, especially like I remember him putting his hand up to the light. That was like a very emotional scene. So,
but no, this movie, I think everybody knew what they were making. I don't think it's fair to give Heather Locklear Worst Actress. I think she was great actress for what she was playing.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with it. She had fun with it. I could tell she was having fun with it. So
yeah. But getting back into the character of Abby Arcane, Abby Arcane first appeared in Swamp Thing number 3 in March of 1973. In the comic book, she is actually Arcane's niece, whereas in the movie, she's the stepdaughter. But here, she is Arcane's niece. In the issue that she debuts in, it's called The Patchwork Man. And you find out that Arcane, who appeared in issue number 2, had this creature locked away who was a Frankenstein-like creature. And you end up finding out that that is actually his brother, Abby's father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So does like more of the Arcane ever get mentioned in like the later comics, or was it just in that specific?
Oh, no. They come back, and I'll actually hit on one of those a little bit later in the moving panel section. No, Arcane is to Swamp Thing as Joker is to Batman, as Lex Luthor is to Superman. Arcane is his main villain. Although it took until much later in the run for them to really lock that in. They kind of just had Arcane pop up here and there. But Abby became a secondary character from that issue on. She actually works with Matt Cable, who is the government official guy working with Interpol, who is tracking down Swamp Thing. He rescues Abby, and Abby just ends up being with him for the rest of kind of that initial run. And then by the time it reached the 80s and Swamp Thing went into the hands of Alan Moore, that is when Abby's relationship moved from Matt Cable to Swamp Thing. So that's where the aspects of this movie kind of took from, was the Alan Moore run, which we'll get into that a little bit more.
Okay.
Other characters we have, none of them came from the comics, but we'll hit them up pretty quickly. First off, we got Dr. Lana Zurel, and I found this so funny that her name was Zurel because she is played by Sarah Douglas, who played Ursa in Superman 2.
Oh, wow. Really? I'm trying to picture her in Superman 2 because I remember watching Superman 2 a lot as a kid.
Yeah, General Zod's second.
That's it. Now that you said it, I see it.
Yep, that was her. Which, actually, I think, I didn't actually look up if this is 100% true. I actually think this made her the first actress to play a comic book character from 2 different properties. Which also, Dick Durock only became the second person to play the same character twice. So Christopher Reeve played Superman in 2 different movies, at 4 by this point, and Dick Durock became the second actor to repeat as a comic book character in a movie. I do want to point out I'm talking about in a movie. Of course, we had television shows, and if we go back into the 40s, we had the movie serials, and we had, Kirk Allen was the original Superman in the movie serial. Then he would also play a Blackhawk, which is another DC property, and he would play one of them. So he did it before. You had Warren Hull, who played Mandrake the Magician, and then would also later play another comic character, although which other one he played has now slipped my mind. But again, we've had it happen in movie serials. We've had it happen on television, but it's never happened in movies.
Big budget movies.
Yeah.
Yep.
The main attraction of a movie.
Mm-hmm. I will say I did like your whole explanation of the Magic Mandrake stuff, because I didn't know that was like one of the first big superheroes that were like really shown to the public.
Yeah. Yep. If you haven't been listening during some of my one-shots, of course, we're taking a break right now in March Madness. I've been diving into Mandrake the Magician and the 1940 or 1939 movie serials that came out there. We still got the other half of those to do. So look out for those when we get back into April after this March Madness Swamp Thing deep dive. But back to the return of Swamp Thing. We've got Dr. Zurel. So now do you see my connection here? Her name's Zurel.
Yes, I see it.
From a Superman movie. Part of me wonders if that wasn't another little nod.
It's a little too on the nose, I feel like, now that you've explained it.
Yeah, because this character was created for the movie. I will say this, though. I think she had a story arc that needed to be fleshed out more.
Oh, definitely. I felt like she had a lot of depth to her, and she went from, evil scientist assistant to someone a little bit more humanized now.
Yeah, but she also had the relationship with Arcane,
mm-hmm.
and then there was maybe the hint of jealousy with Abby. They definitely were trying to one-up each other in the way they dressed, I would say.
Yeah,
throughout.
very much.
But yeah, then she decides to help out Abby, but then she also not only betrays Arcane at the end, but she also betrays Dr. Rochelle. And so, part of me was like, I kind of wanted that to be, I don't know if there was maybe a hint or a thought of a part 3 at one point, and so they thought that her story would be elaborated on more. But yeah, I just felt like there was something missing with that story. There just needed to be more to it.
Felt a little rushed, maybe. Could have been fleshed out and stretched out more, but like you said, if they did a part 3 to it, who would have known to see what else we could have done with her?
All right, but speaking of Dr. Rochelle, let's talk about Dr. Rochelle, played by Ace Mask. Yeah, that's his name.
Ace Mask.
Ace Mask.
Sounds like a bad hardware store.
Sounds like he came from one of Wynorski's other movies. Here's the thing, though. This was not the only movie that Ace Mask was in that was directed by Jim Wynorski, and not the only movie he was in which his character is named Dr. Rochelle.
What was the other one?
Before this, he did a movie with Wynorski called Not of This Earth, which I am not familiar with at all.
No.
He did Not of This Earth, where he played a character named Dr. Rochelle. And then the other movie he plays Dr. Rochelle in is Ghoulies 4.
Wait, there's a fourth Ghoulies?
Yes, which is directed by Jim Wynorski.
I thought there were only 2.
Nope. I actually think I've seen the fourth one. I know I've seen the third one, but I think I've seen the fourth one.
I've seen the first 2. Second one scared me as a kid. Does he have an inhaler in all those films?
Okay, so I want to talk about the inhaler. I hated the way he took hits off that inhaler.
I did too.
He just holds it to his mouth, open mouth, doesn't wrap his lips around it at all. And then you just hear, like I was like, does nobody on the set know how to take a hit off of an inhaler?
Right. Somebody has to have asthma somewhere. Just show them real quick, Oh man, I just thought it was so funny and unnecessary. It's almost like reminded me of like someone like just like trying to snort like cocaine in a film. Yeah. They just do it really weird, and that's what I got the vibe from.
Well,
when he kept doing that. I wouldn't know. I'm just saying, like with some of those like TV shows and stuff, when someone like does a hit off an inhaler, they don't do it right, and he was the prime example of it.
Well, and then in the director commentary, he said that he gave him the inhaler to have that little bit, so that at the end, when he shows up as the monster, you would realize it's him because the monster takes the hit off the inhaler when he. Just went, oh God, that's just so stupid.
It's so stupid.
So stupid. But let's move on. I only threw this in. I'm only going to talk about this character because of one little trivia bit. So Gunn, the head of Arcane's security, played by Joey Segal. And let me tell you why I want to mention him. Because I found out he is the brother of Katie Segal, a.k.a. Peg Bundy.
Peg Bundy?
From Married with Children.
Oh my gosh. Oh, are you serious?
Yes.
And that's like his acting debut or something?
I don't think it was his debut, but I heard the name Segal, and of course I'm just going, well, is it like Steven Seagal or nope? Katie Segal.
That's what I was about to say.
Katie Seagal
well.
is his sister, Leela from Futurama.
I didn't know she had a brother.
Yeah, Gemma from Sons of Anarchy. Peg Bundy from Married with Children. That's her brother that's playing Gunn.
That is hilarious. I love it.
Found that cool. I feel like we can't talk about characters without also talking about Omar and Daryl, a.k.a. the Swamp Goonies.
They were my favorite part of the whole
Omar was played by, and I may butcher this first name, Ronrico Lee, and Daryl was played by Daniel Emery Taylor, who the director Wynorski said reminded him of a young John Candy.
I don't know about that, but
I know about it. No. So here's my question: were they annoying?
When we got past the swamp bit, that's when they got annoying for me, because I was like, oh, funny, we show them 2 times, and then maybe they'll show up at the end with the camera, but then when they have them just still talking throughout the whole swamp bit, I'm like, okay, this is not cute anymore. This is kind of like filler for comedy where it's like really unnecessary and you kids are just like, eh.
You say it's filler for comedy. I more think it was, which we'll talk about this more later when we're talking about the movie. I felt like their inclusion was just to go, hey, we just want to let you know that this is a movie for kids.
Yeah, especially when kids are, showing each other their parents like adult magazine collection.
Yeah. which Wynorski points out in the commentary, they made sure that they only used magazines that did not show nudity. I guess for you and I, it would be like Maxim and FHM.
Yeah.
Like, they use those type of magazines. All right. Last character I want to talk about, because again, just fun trivia. There's just so much fun trivia in this. There has to be something fun about this movie, right? Gigi, the parrot.
Oh, the parrot.
The parrot.
Wait, that's a character?
So first off, I want to point out the parrot's name is Gigi. That is a reference to the 1958 movie musical. Let me mind you, the 1958 movie musical Gigi, which starred Louis Jourdain.
You might have to educate me a little bit on that. My 90s mind is not that good.
Well, I mean, it's really just the connection to Louis Jourdain. So Louis Jourdain, who's playing Arcane.
Oh, I see the connection now. Oh my gosh. All right. Sorry. I thought we were talking about like some separate something else. Never mind.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking too deeply about a parrot.
Yeah, no, this is a connection to the 1958 movie Gigi, which starred Louis Jourdain. I mentioned in the first Swamp Thing episode about him also being the villain in Octopussy, but I like that this one just gave us that little reference. He also apparently quotes a line from Gigi to the parrot at one point, but I didn't quite know the line. I only heard it in the commentary that he said he actually got Jourdain to agree to kind of parody himself for that one little moment. So yeah, now let's continue the trivia on Gigi.
Oh no.
So, Gigi actually speaks. You hear a voice come out of this parrot. That voice is a man by the name of Frank Welker, a very famous voice actor. Frank Welker. Are you familiar with Frank Welker?
No, I'm not.
Well, here we go.
All right, here we go.
This is going to be a small list because this man has worked and still works to this day as a voice actor. But Frank Welker is the original Fred from Scooby-Doo.
That's amazing.
Yep.
I can't even imagine it.
And in 2002, he actually became the voice of Scooby. And he was even still the voice of Scooby for the feature film Scoob that just came out like a couple years ago.
Oh, that's amazing. He's still doing stuff. That's so cool.
He is also the original voice of Megatron and Soundwave.
Like which version? Because I remember one version I used to watch as a kid, like early 2000.
That's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Never mind then.
In fact, I'm pretty sure he's always been the voice of Megatron and Soundwave, even in the movies.
Oh.
You know how they got the same guy who was the voice of Optimus Prime for the movies.
Yeah,
I think Frank Welker is also the voice of Soundwave.
Oh, that's so cool if they actually did that. I'm gonna say that they did as well. That'd be really neat.
Just to throw out a few other famous voices, he was Jabberjaw, which I was a fan of, kind of doing a Curly from the Three Stooges impersonation. He's the, I guess you would say, voice, but he makes the noises for Curious George, and he was the voice of Astro on the Jetsons.
Now that I can hear Astro after you just said that, I could totally see like the in what he did with the parrot Gigi now. Like, I can kind of like hear it. That's so cool.
Yeah, but this guy's got a long list of voice work he's done over the years. But so I thought that was cool. He's Gigi the parrot in this movie.
That's so awesome. I love that.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. And we got to start off by talking about something that was almost literally panels. The opening title sequence. Those were all real panels and covers of Swamp Thing comics.
I thought that was great. It made me, because I've never really read Swamp Thing, but after seeing that, I loved how they like picked panels from it and everything, the colors, the different, angles from Swamp Thing. It was just really cool. Really way to really open him up and show him off.
Yeah, and it stretched the entire span from the first issue in 1970s all the way to the current runs in the 80s with some of the Alan Moore stuff. In fact, one of the panels is even when Swamp Thing finds out about the Parliament of Trees, which is where he learns about him actually being an elemental, the Earth Elemental. And it's after he's found out, spoiler, I'm going to say spoiler here because this doesn't have a connection to this movie. In the comics, as well as in the more recent television show that came on DC Universe, Swamp Thing finds out that he isn't actually Alec Holland, that he is just the Earth Elemental who took on the persona of Alec Holland. And I won't get into that in great detail, but he pretty much finds out he's not just a Alec Holland turned into a monster. So, but he finds out that he's not Alec Holland turned into a monster, that he is a separate creature who just kind of absorbed some of Alec Holland's essence when Alec Holland died and he was born. So,
okay, so it does sound a little confusing.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's a much deeper kind of story to get into. But they do play that out in the Swamp Thing television series. Let's talk about some of the actual straight out of the comic moments that are in this movie. So the first thing comes to us from Swamp Thing number 10 back in June of 1974. In that issue of Swamp Thing meets this elderly woman who was being attacked by a man who then you find out that he was actually dead the whole time. She then tells Swamp Thing a story about a plantation that had an evil owner named Samson Parmenter. And Parmenter was a ruthless overseer who abused his slaves. And I'm going to say I took that wording straight off a description from one of the DC sites. Can you really say abused his slaves? Like, wouldn't just calling them slaves be enough?
Feels like a little redundant.
Yeah. But frequently abused his slaves, including a woman named Elsbeth. But Elsbeth's lover, Black Jubal, fought against Parmenter to save Elsbeth. And as punishment, Parmenter had Black Jubal killed. Now, do you know the part of the movie that references that issue?
No, I can't even think about it right now.
It's a complete throwaway moment. But it's when Swamp Thing and Abby are walking through the swamp, and Swamp Thing tells her about a plantation that used to stand there, and that some people even still say that the ghosts of the slaves still roam about.
Yeah, I completely missed that. There's must have been like a really big just throwaway while they were having some conversation or something.
I mean, that's it. Yeah, it is. And that's it. That's all that is said. In that issue, what's also a nice little connection to this movie is that is the first time Arcane returns. So Arcane was in issue number 2. Arcane is presumed dead at the end of issue number 2. And then here in issue number 10, Arcane returns. Now, when he returns, he's a monster. It's a creature that's kind of created by his unmen. And where his unmen are these kind of like you saw in the movie, kind of these mutated, experimenting on people.
Gene-spliced creations.
Yeah, gene-spliced creations. Well, when they fell with him in issue 2, they fell from this height down into this ravine. You find out that they saved him by using their bodies, and they formed a body gave him a new body to keep him alive. And so Swamp Thing and Arcane fight, and then the ghost of Black Jubal, as well as several of the other slaves, show up and take down Arcane.
So that's such a wow, interesting yet kind of strange. I don't know, just something, the concept of ghosts coming out during a superhero fight still baffles me sometimes. I'm like,
well,
why do you
there's
show
a
up?
lot of those early Swamp Thing. I mean, they pretty much tackled just about anything and everything in the realm of the horror genre. You know, they had Swamp Thing encounter a witch being hunted by a mob. You know, he encountered, obviously, a Frankenstein-type creature. He encountered a werewolf out in the Scottish moors. So they did pretty much anything and everything you could think of in terms of ghost stories and myths and legends and horror and all
Go
that.
through the whole, like, you know, Universal monsters almost.
Yeah. Okay. The next connection is one of the most probably talked about scenes in this movie. It comes from Swamp Thing number 34 in March of 1985. Now, this is when Alan Moore has taken over for Swamp Thing, and he's changed up the style. Again, this is where we find out that Swamp Thing's not actually Alec Holland. But we also start getting the relationship between Swamp Thing and Abby. Well, in this issue, Swamp Thing and Abby are intimate, just like in this movie.
Is that what you would call it? Because to me, it was more or less she was, no pun intended, nibbling at his forbidden fruit.
So let's get into a little bit of that. In the comic book, right before it happens, there's a pink flower growing off of Swamp Thing. And she asks if she could pick it, and she puts it in her hair, which I kind of think they reference. If you remember in this scene, there's all these pink flowers all over the swamp area that they're at. Now, the exact same thing happens in the comic. He pulls off a piece of him that she has to eat, and they go on a trip. But in the well, in the comic book, it really it's several pages. And it's really like it's this hallucination that is going on. Whereas in the movie, they make it just look like they're experiencing it in their minds.
An out-of-body experience almost.
Yeah, and this is where I go back to the Barbarella aspects, like when they took the pill in Barbarella and they just sit staring at each other. Because that's how we see Swamp Thing and Abby. If you look, they're holding hands.
They are.
Sitting on the ground. But yeah, the little fruit or whatever you want to call it that Swamp Thing pulls out of his pocket. Like,
Thank you. Like his, I don't know where it was. Like I thought he pulled like out of his like stomach or something at first. I'm like,
yeah,
dude, what are
it
you
looked
doing?
like if he was tucking it inside his belt. In the comic, he pulls it out like out of his chest, which if you think about it, that is more because it's almost like it's a part of his heart.
Yeah.
That he's, and I'm thinking, why not go with that? And it probably also, like you would have said, it wouldn't have maybe wouldn't have had the implication of what that little thing looked like that he pulls out.
That is true. I was like, say, how low are you going to go to do that? Because after I watched the film, I'm about to say, I wonder if they did it on purpose to put that there to be like, okay, we're having an intimate scene pulled out, kind of below your waist. Really?
I will say, though, that in the commentary, the director makes it sound like he came up with that whole idea. And I'm just sitting there going, no, dude, Alan Moore did that. Not a big fan of you taking credit for that. So I don't know about that. But going into that scene, though, when they pan up and then they pan back down and Swamp Thing is now supposedly in their fantasy, he's turned back into Alec Holland. That is not Dick Durock. It is some, I think he said stuntman or actor, some other actor they had there on set that they got him to do it. And apparently he was extremely arrogant, which bothered Heather Locklear so much.
Now that you just said that explains why that intimate scene looks so awkward. Very awkward.
They said that she was a professional. She did the scene. She wanted to do it with Durock, but Durock, I wouldn't say refused to do it. He said he didn't want to do it because to get in and out of that costume and the makeup was too much.
Hours of that, and it's just kind of like we're going to be wasting time on set.
So from what I've gathered is they got the guy, Heather Locklear, as much as she did not like working with the guy. She was a professional. They filmed the scene, and then they sent that guy on his way. Like, and we're done. You can go home now.
That was good. One take. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that whole scene looked really weird, especially when I was like watching him with her. She looked a lot more natural with it. He did not. He looked very just like, I'm going to put my mouth on you. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't look very intimate and romantic.
And then finally, the only other connection I could find with the comics was from Swamp Thing number 47 in April of 1986. Because what happens in that issue, and this is how the issue starts off, is you find out that a nature photographer was out in the swamps in Louisiana, and he was taking some pictures of wildlife, and he just so happened to see Abby. He stayed hidden, started taking pictures of Abby. Abby started removing her clothes. He decided, hey, there are other magazines I could sell these pictures to.
Oh, God.
So he continues to take pictures, pervy dude that he is. And then while Abby is bathing in the water, Swamp Thing shows up and they become intimate. And so you have a photographer that has these pictures of Abby and Swamp Thing being intimate, which in the comics eventually leads Abby to get arrested for crimes against nature. I kid you not. That's what they charge her with.
That doesn't even sound like a real crime. Crimes against nature.
That's what they charge her with.
That's so weird.
But I thought it was kind of connected because at the end of this movie, we see our fun little swamp goonies taking a picture of Swamp Thing and Abby. So there
and
you
then
go.
the whole line about saying, no, don't take a picture, they're kissing. And I'm just like, now I see the whole connection with it. That's kind of funny.
Although, did you see the it wasn't really a post-credit scene, but kind of like a mid-credit scene with the Swamp Goonies?
Oh, no, I don't think I did. I think I just...
Yeah, where you find out that they went to get the photos developed, and they find out that they didn't have any film in the camera the whole time.
Oh, my God.
So it's just the two of them arguing outside of the photo booth about forgetting the film. So, yeah, the whole time they had no film in the camera.
That's funny, because I was going to go with the whole lens cap joke, because I'm like, okay, I obviously can tell the lens cap's on it. Are they going to go with that joke? And he's like, the lens cap's still on. I'm like, okay, they're not. But now that you told me the film part, that's funnier.
Then Omar goes, oh, that's why it was so dark. Oh, my God. Yeah. Okay. That's really it for the connection. So let's just talk about the movie. Being familiar with the original, which is, again, Wes Craven. It was more serious, more kind of going after that almost Creature from the Black Lagoon horror element, movie monster element, to the complete tonal shift of this movie, where we are more cartoonish, we are more comedic. What were your thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I remember aspects of the first one, the lighting and everything. I do remember that kind of vaguely. But with this film, I like the tongue-in-cheek of it. Sequelitis is a thing. I believe it, where you don't really hate sequels, but you enjoy them. I enjoyed The Return of Swamp Thing. I actually loved the effects for the whole film. I loved his whole the coming into the bathtub bit. I love the monsters that were there. I wanted to see more of them, though, from the laboratory. I was hoping he was going to fight a couple of them at some point, but it was just kind of a little anticlimactic with the fights.
Well, speaking of the fights, because mostly of all those creatures, he fights the Leech Man.
Yeah.
Fights him twice at the very beginning of the movie. By the way, speaking of the very beginning of the movie, were you aware that those guys, the nerdy guys that are out there, that they were supposed to be ATF agents?
No, I didn't get any of that. At first, I thought they were... When they mentioned moonshine, I thought they were just being country boys trying to go steal somebody's moonshine distillery stuff.
No, they were ATF agents who were going to arrest the people who were making moonshine out in the swamp. Yeah, I don't know. I think the thing was again, with them being all nerdy and all that, being dressed the way they are, it reminded me a lot of Friday the 13th Part 6, when Jason goes after those weekend warriors that
playing in paintball game.
Kind of reminded me of that. But going back to his fight with Leechman, the second one where he rescues the two kids from Leechman, what were your thoughts on them banging the pipes together and getting lightning?
I didn't understand that at all. I didn't know that. Now that I think about it, I didn't know that the ore was metal. I thought it was wooden. That's why I thought it was very strange. I was like, okay, Swamp Thing's got a metal post from a swing set, and then here comes Leech Man with a wooden orb. But now that you told me that lightning was coming down, that makes a lot more sense why there's electricity for whatever reason.
Yeah, they just clang together, and you get this little lightning effect.
Very strange,
Okay.
though.
We talked about this earlier. Let's talk about it again. Was this movie intended for kids?
I can see it being intended for kids.
All right. But yet, we've got scantily clad women. We've got very, very detailed and kind of creepy monsters, scary monsters. And then we've got these two hillbillies.
Oh, God, that part.
Yeah, you forget about which, by the way, did you get that they're the guys with the
moonshine? Yes,
Yeah.
that dialogue. That's dark.
Yeah, because they're talking about going to blow something up or
Let's
go
kill
steal a
something.
car. Yeah. And then when Heather Locklear shows up, I mean, again, we're going to keep this PG as possible, but I'm going to be blunt here. They were going to rape her.
Yeah, I could have seen that, being something that was on their minds as well with it. But now that you've talked about it, and I was going to continue on by saying, I see it being geared toward kids. However, I think the teens would have been more appropriate for it. Maybe going for a teen audience and up.
Yeah. Now you're a good bit younger than me, but I want to see if this, but you are kind of the movie fan that you are. This, to me, watching it, felt a lot more like something I would have seen on USA Up All Night.
Yeah, definitely. Sci-fi had these kind of films playing all the time, because usually after you have all these bad films, that's when Mystery Science Theater 3000 would come up right after how bad these films and everything else.
I really, which is funny, I say USA Up All Night because the television show that followed this movie aired on USA. But yeah, it felt to me, and I don't know if it was because probably a lot of the director's other movies probably did appear on USA Up All Night. But it just really feels like this movie would have taken breaks and I would have seen Gilbert Godfrey or Rhonda Shearer telling me, we'll be right back to Return to Swamp Thing on USA Up All Night. So, yeah, just wanted to point that out. Any other thoughts about the movie before we get into our final decision?
The whole California joke thing, I'm just I feel like this is just like a Southerner thing. I'm just like, is this how people in the South really are? Do they really think people like this in the South act like this? And the avocado joke, I'm like, okay, we get it. Avocados come from there. That was another thing that just irked me a bit. I was like, okay, we keep bringing up the fact that she's from California, and the South hates California people.
Well, I mean, even whoever wrote it, because they make her kind of blonde. I mean, we're introduced to her. She's talking to plants.
Oh yeah, and some of her. Now that you mentioned the whole geared toward kids bit, going back just a bit, when she talks about the plants again, and I'm like, I don't think they're gonna pick up on this, and maybe it's just me with my mind sometimes. And she's talking about, when I go up to a plant, it doesn't, act like a man to me or something like, or when I stroke a plant versus how I stroke a man. Yeah,
you can stroke a plant without it thinking that it's something else. Yeah.
It wants something else, and I'm just kind of like. Really?
Well, it's not just, if we're going to talk about those little kind of innuendo lines that she says, what about when right before the intimate scene between her and Swamp Thing, when they're kind of teasing at it, and then he says, but I'm a plant, and she says, that's okay, I'm a vegetarian.
Oh my God, now that you just said it like that, that's another line I think went over my head because I was too enamored with this whole is she really looking at him with hungry eyes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into our final decision. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. Go ahead, James. Tell us how you feel this movie should be treated as a comic book.
I'd trade it. I enjoyed it for one little fun thing, but it's not something that I would keep going back to over and over. I would just trade it in.
No more than that. You're just like, it was a watch.
I mean, this is just me, because I'm more, like Laramie knows, I'm more of a Marvel fan. I love DC, but with Marvel, you have Man-Thing, so I guess with me not knowing that much about Swamp Thing and having more fun, I had more fun with Man-Thing.
Please don't tell me you are not going to say Man-Thing is better than Swamp Thing.
Design-wise. Design-wise. Story-wise, I think Swamp Thing's is better. I feel like Man-Thing's a copy of it. I don't know. That's my point, because I'm like, I feel like I like the
Yeah.
story for Man-Thing. It's better.
This will be a conversation for another time, but
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. But that's my thing on it, because I saw Swamp Thing, I liked the idea, but then when I saw Man-Thing as I got older, I thought they were the same thing, and then I didn't know that it's Marvel, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm confused.
Okay, let me kind of clear some of this up a bit. You're talking about the comic characters, right?
Yes,
Have you ever seen the Man-Thing movie?
I think I have when it was on Sci-Fi.
It pretty much was a sci-fi movie. Like, I don't think it was. I think that was how it was originally released. Was on Sci-Fi. Oh yeah, don't compare. As people know, I'm a bigger DC guy, but I have my respect for Marvel. But when you start comparing characters that are similar, oh no, Swamp Thing is so much better of a character than Man-Thing. But
That's it. Character-wise, I liked Swamp Thing. Design of the creature, I liked Man-Thing.
okay, I respect it. I actually am going to put this as a stack it. The thing is if I had to choose whether to watch the first Swamp Thing or the Return of Swamp Thing, I would actually choose to watch the Return of Swamp Thing.
Oh, same.
If you gave me a choice between the two Swamp Thing movies, I would choose this one. It's fun. It's a movie that you're not gonna pull this one out to watch with friends, but it's one that I would put on. Maybe, especially if it's on a streaming service, I would put it on while I'm cleaning house. I would put it on while I was doing something else where I wouldn't have to really pay attention to it. Yeah, it's fun. And that's pretty much where I'll leave it. The suit is amazing.
Oh, I love it.
Love the suit. Love the look of Swamp Thing. Like that he's getting to battle it out with some creatures, even though I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen more of that. Maybe even have an Arcane call them his Unmen to make a more connection with the comic.
Ooh, that'd have been cool.
But yeah, it's a fun movie for me, and so I'm gonna put it in the realm of stack it. That's where I'm gonna put it. All right, James. Well, thank you very much. Be sure to check out James's podcast, Interview with a Horror Virgin. I know I want to do another episode with him. We've done one together. I would like to do, but I'm also a big horror movie fan. So finding a horror movie I have never seen has been a challenge.
It is a challenge. That's the hard part for other people.
But check it out. You can find it the same place you find this podcast, anywhere where podcasts are available. But thank you, James, for joining me for this walk through the Return of Swamp Thing.
Thank you so much, Laramie. I enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. I really did.
But thanks, everybody, for joining us. Follow us on social media. We're at Moving Panels on pretty much every platform. And rate and review us. It's a great help for this show. But for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.